night. On Saturday, the remote
I'm
bush
sorry,
community of
Senator
Bingari.
McCarthy, given it's 2 p.m, we do have to move to questions without notice. Senator Keneally.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. On the 31st of October, LNP MP George Christensen posted a photo of Victorian Premier Dan Andrews on his Telegram account, inciting violent comments threatening Premier Andrews' life. These posts have been drawn to the attention of the Minister for Home Affairs, Karen Andrews, and have been referred to the AFP. What action has Mr Morrison taken in response to Mr Christensen's online activity?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Keneally for the question. I note that Senator Keneally indicated that the posts had been either drawn to the attention of or referred to the Minister for Home Affairs, this, I can say, is the first I'm aware of the posts in question. So in terms of any other engagement that government may have had, I will take that on notice, Senator.
Senator Keneally, a supplementary question.
On the 26th of August, Mr Christensen posted a video of Catherine King MP, which incited threatening comments directed at Ms King. The post was drawn to the attention of the AFP. What action has Mr Morrison taken in response to this online activity from Mr Christensen?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Once again, I will take that on notice in terms of any further information that can be provided beyond what the Senator has referenced in relation to whether any agencies or others are looking at those matters. Again, I'm not aware in particular of the specific content of the post that the Senator is referring to.
Senator Keneally, a second supplementary.
Given Mr Christensen has fomented anger and failed to moderate comments inciting violence on his own social media account, has the Prime Minister directed Mr Christensen to remove posts and comments inciting violence against the Premier of Victoria and any other public figure?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Let me be very clear in stating in the chamber, as I said on radio this morning and have said in a number of other places, and as the Prime Minister has said as well, there is no place for violence or remarks that incite violence or create or inflame unnecessary tensions in ways that could provoke violence in Australian political debate. I've taken on notice that the specific references to Mr Christensen's apparent posts or apparent content on sites. As I said in response to those questions, I'm not aware of the particular posts that Senator Keneally refers to or the particular content she refers to. But if there's information in terms of engagement in relation to those matters that I can add and bring to the chamber, I'll do so.
Senator McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Can the Minister please update the Senate on how the Liberal and Nationals government's national plan is securing our economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and will deliver more economic opportunities for Australian families and businesses?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator McLaughlin very much for his question, and I know his interest in seeing Australian business, Australian families continue to be able to enjoy the benefits of the dividend of Australia's management of COVID-19. Management that has saved more than 30,000 lives across our country, management that has saved many thousands of businesses and many hundreds of thousands of jobs across our country. And pleasingly, the national plan that the Prime Minister took to National Cabinet, underpinned by scientific modelling, is charting the pathway that is enabling each of the states and territories to open up, to take the progress forward that gives businesses the confidence to plan and to invest. And we're seeing that across the country, Mr President. New unpublished payroll jobs data shows that in New South Wales, new hires have increased by some 25% in the fortnight to the 24th of October. This data also shows that in Victoria, new hires are up by 15%, and here in the ACT they're up by 22%. It shows very clearly, Mr President, that businesses getting back on with the business of creating jobs and creating prosperity across our country. Indeed, payroll data shows that small businesses across Australia have created more than 300,000 jobs for Australians in the period April 2020 to September 2021, while medium-sized businesses created another 300,000 jobs. That's 600,000 additional jobs right across our country. For small businesses alone, it's showing around 18,000 jobs per month, or around 4,500 jobs per week being created. Job ads showing at a 30% higher level than they were at the start of the pandemic. In fact, job ads in Australia, Mr President, at a 12-year high, underpinned by high levels of business confidence, high levels of consumer confidence, all of it thanks to the fact that we are well on that path to reopening.
Your time has expired. Senator McLaughlin, a supplementary question.
What are the next steps in the government's plan to reopen our international borders, and why is it critical to supporting jobs and economic growth?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, as the Prime Minister said today, we're making significant progress on the delivery of the National Reopening Plan, underpinned by that safe, sound scientific advice that the Prime Minister has relied upon and has taken through National Cabinet. It's another win for Australians that we're seeing today, with the nation in excess of 85% double-dose vaccination around the country, that we can move to enable from the 1st of December this year fully vaccinated eligible visa holders to be able to come to Australia without needing to apply for a travel exemption. This includes skilled and student cohorts, as well as humanitarian, working holidaymaker and provisional visa holders. The closure of Australia's borders was one of the most important decisions taken to keep our nation safe, but this reopening, including reopening to fully vaccinated citizens from Japan and the Republic of Korea, shows that we are now back on the path to welcoming visitors back to our country and making steady progress on the implementation of that national plan.
Your time has expired. Senator McLaughlin, a second supplementary question.
How has the government's plan for lower taxes supported Australian jobs and businesses throughout the pandemic, and why is it important to continue this approach to ensure confidence through the COVID recovery?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, indeed, the government's economic policies have provided not only a safety valve but an underpinning to the economy and to Australian businesses and Australian jobs throughout the pandemic, but crucially they have also provided the platform for this strong recovery and rebound. In the September quarter just gone, $10.2 billion flowed into the pockets of Australians in tax cuts that had been delivered by our government, representing the largest quarterly tax cut in over 2 decades. We expect a further $15 billion in tax cuts will flow this financial year, around $1.5 billion every month going to the pockets of Australian families and households to be able to support their investment, their plans, and through that our economic recovery. Small business benefiting from some $5 billion worth of lower taxes that we have delivered to them. All of that contrasted, though, if you saw the Shadow Treasurer yesterday, not able to give any commitments about taxes under a future Labor government, whereas the proof from us—
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr President. And my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. In August last year, Mr Morrison declared that he expected the COVID-19 vaccine to be, and I quote, "as mandatory as you can possibly make." Does Mr Morrison stand by this statement?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, the Prime Minister has been very clear right throughout the course of the pandemic that we have no appetite for mandatory vaccinations, aside from where the health advice makes it very clear that there is a real benefit in doing so. Now, in that regard, where that health advice so led, he led, the Prime Minister led and the government led, particularly when it came to aged care and requiring and asking the states to pursue mandatory vaccination around aged care workers. That was something the Prime Minister took to National Cabinet, asked the state and territories to agree with, and they then progressively set about implementing that. We've supported them in relation to decisions about disability care workers and in relation to essential health workers working with those who are most vulnerable, most exposed when it comes to COVID-19. But we've been clear that, more broadly, the best way to achieve the high levels of vaccination rates that Australia has achieved, the more than 85% double-dose vaccination across the country, is to ensure that Australians understand, first and foremost, the benefit of being vaccinated, the fact that it provides greater safety to them, their loved ones and those around them. And Australians have responded most positively and in world-leading terms in regard to receiving those vaccines. They've done so overwhelmingly voluntarily. We thank them for it. We acknowledge the fact they have heeded those messages, and we continue, through public communications campaigns and other efforts, to pursue and to urge Australians who have not yet been vaccinated to add to that 85% double-dose rate to date.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator O'Neill.
Thank Senator Birmingham for his
Senator O'Neill, why
for
are you
his
on
comments,
your
but
feet?
yes, but the point of order is relevance. So I thank the senator for his comments. The question was
Senator
about
O'Neill, the minister was being
mandatory.
directly relevant.
The question was about mandatory.
Please go ahead.
So, Mr. President, the point is a point of relevance. The minister has been talking about vaccinations and applauding Australians. I'm always going to acknowledge that. But the question was about mandatory. As mandatory as you possibly can make it, and I don't believe that the minister, with respect, has answered that part of the question at all.
With respect, I listened carefully to the minister's answer. I believe he was being directly relevant. Minister.
Thanks, Mr. President. As I said right at the outset, the government's always been clear, and we have no desire for mandatory vaccinations except where it is absolutely essential in relation to the health advice. But
Minister,
we urge every single Australian to get vaccinated.
The time for your answer has expired. Senator O'Neill, a supplementary question.
Mr. Morrison then went on to say, and I quote, "There are always exemptions for any vaccine on medical grounds, but that should be the only basis." Does Mr. Morrison stand by this statement?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr. President. And well, Mr. President, the answer is precisely as I said before, that as a government, from the Prime Minister down, we've been consistent in regards to not expecting COVID-19 vaccination to be mandatory across the country, but to supporting and encouraging every single Australian to get vaccinated, and to supporting and to leading the states and territories in relation to vaccine mandates where the health advice has argued it is necessary for the protection of our most vulnerable.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Wong.
Direct relevance, Mr. President. This does go to a specific question about a past statement from the Prime Minister and whether or not he still stands by that statement. Now, nothing the minister has said actually goes to that statement. In fact, it's the new line, not the line that he's been asked about.
I'm happy to rule. I've been listening very carefully to the answer. I cannot direct a minister how to answer a question. Minister, you have the call.
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Prime Minister has said on countless occasions, when asked about vaccinations, that he was not going to mandate it across Australia. He was very clear on that. On many occasions over a very, very long period of time. That's the position he has continued to hold and that the government continues to hold, except in those exceptional circumstances.
Your time has expired. Senator O'Neill, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. President. When asked if he's going to have campaigns from the anti-vaxxers, Mr. Morrison boasted, and I quote, "I was the minister that established no jab, no play. So my view on this is pretty clear and not for turning." Does Mr. Morrison hold the same clear views, or was he lying when he said that?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, the Prime Minister absolutely holds the same clear views in support of encouraging every single Australian to get vaccinated. And indeed, more than 91% of Australians over the age of 16 have had a first dose, have heeded that message, have responded positively. and more than 85% of Australians over the age of 16 have followed through and had that second dose to become fully vaccinated, ensuring that we are one of the most highly protected countries in the world now. That in terms of vaccine uptake, we are one of the most highly protected countries in the world, well above the OECD average now, above countries like Israel or the UK, a nation that has demonstrated that you can have a pathway to vaccination, overwhelmingly voluntarily applied, but that Australians will respond to the merit of those arguments which have been laid out to encourage them to do so. They have. We thank them and we continue to encourage them to do so.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck. Can the Minister update the Senate on Australia's COVID-19 vaccine rollout and how Australia's health outcomes compare to other countries?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Henderson, for your question. President, on both health and economic fronts, Australia has fared better than most countries in dealing with COVID-19. Australians have been rolling up to get vaccinated, and I join everyone in the chamber, I think, in thanking them for doing that, for protecting themselves, protecting their loved ones, and for protecting the country. More than 91% of the eligible population over 16 are now protected against COVID-19 with the first dose. Of the 38 developed OECD countries, Australia has had the second lowest number of COVID-19 cases per capita, the second lowest. The USA and the UK have had more than 40 times the number of COVID deaths compared to Australia. For example, over 12% of people in the US and 11% of people in the UK have had COVID. By contrast, 0.4% of Australians have had COVID. We estimate, President, that our vaccine program has saved more than 30,000 lives. 30,000 lives. While Australia has been doing it tough, our economy remains resilient. Australia was the first advanced economy to have more people in work than prior to COVID. Nearly 900,000 jobs have been created since May last year. After last year's recession, Australia's economy, the GDP, recovered to be larger than prior to the pandemic, ahead of any advanced major economy in the world, President. And now, thanks to our high vaccination rates, we can start to safely reopen our borders to the world, and Aussies can get back to doing the things they love.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Henderson, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. What is the Liberal and Nationals government doing to further protect Australians against COVID-19? Minister.
Thank you, President. To provide even greater protection against COVID-19, Australians aged 18 and over who have received 2 doses of a vaccine at least 6 months ago are now eligible to have a booster shot. This follows advice from Australia's vaccine experts, the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, and approval from Australia's medicines regulator, the Therapeutic Goods Administration. The booster program has commenced its rollout directly to people living in residential aged care and disability homes through in-reach programs, Mr President. This makes Australia one of the first countries in the world to commence a whole-of-population booster program. With over 151 million Pfizer, Novavax and Moderna vaccines already secured for supply into the future, Australia is well prepared to provide booster doses as approvals are provided by the medical experts.
Senator Henderson, a final supplementary.
Thanks, Mr President. Minister, as our borders reopen and we welcome international visitors back to Australia as part of our economic recovery, which vaccines will be recognised in this country?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. The Therapeutic Goods Administration has recognised 2 additional COVID-19 vaccines for this purpose recently, for the purpose of establishing a traveller's vaccination status. This includes Covaxin, manufactured by Bharat Biotech India, and BBIBP Core V, manufactured by Sinopharm in China. Covaxin is recognised for travellers aged 12 and over, and BBIBP Core V is recognised for those aged 18 to 60. President, this means that many citizens of China and India, as well as other countries where vaccines have been widely used, will be considered fully vaccinated on entry to Australia, and this is especially important as we welcome back international students to our shores. There are now 8 COVID-19 vaccines that have been approved, all recognised by the TGA for entry into Australia, and work continues to acknowledge more. Thank you.
Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question without notice is to Minister Birmingham, representing the Prime Minister. Minister, in March 2019, the Christchurch mosque attacks were carried out by an Australian far-right extremist, killing 51 innocent Muslims. ASIO is now reporting that up to 50% of its domestic counter-terrorism caseload relates to ideologically motivated violent extremism, which is off the back of a sharp rise in far-right extremism. The past weekend, we saw far-right extremists on the streets again, and some have issued death threats towards public figures. Known neo-Nazis and fascists are in attendance at rallies. Some protesters held anti-Semitic and offensive signs. Does the government admit that far-right extremists are spreading their hate, abuse and threats? And will you and the Prime Minister today outright condemn far-right extremism?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. I thank Senator Faruqi for her question. She is right that ASIO has identified threats from ideologically motivated violent extremism, particularly nationalist and racist violent extremism, is growing and does present a serious threat to Australia's security, and they've estimated that it comprises around 50% of their priority onshore counter-terrorism caseload. Mr. President, we unequivocally condemn all such terrorist activity, all such motivations that seek to promote any form of violence or threat to Australians based upon such ideology. Mr. President, Australia's terrorism laws, which our government has worked in a bipartisan way, I acknowledge, to strengthen target criminal activity, not ideologies or communities' background, but they target the criminal activities, but have also sought to empower our agencies, in particular ASIO and the Australian Federal Police, to be better placed to be able to respond and to ensure that where such views manifest themselves into potential threats, those agencies are as well placed as possible to be able to respond, disrupt, counter and prevent those threats. I do acknowledge the bipartisanship that we've had in relation to the passage of such legislation and such reforms, because, Mr. President, it has required bipartisanship given the fact that there have often been efforts on the crossbench to weaken some of those legislative measures that we've sought to bring forward. We've backed those tougher legislative reforms, Mr. President, with additional funding, both in terms of measures in relation to social cohesion as well as support for our security agencies to be able to undertake that important work of identification
Minister,
and disruption.
The time for your answer has expired. Senator Faruqi, a supplementary question.
Thank you, President. It's pretty disgraceful that this government and the Prime Minister keep refusing to outright condemn far-right extremism. Minister, on 9th December last year, I asked you whether the government—
Order.
Minister, Mr. President. Minister, on 9th December last year, I asked you whether the government would respond to the Royal Commission into the Christchurch mosque attacks. You gave me the commitment that our government will examine the report thoroughly. Has the government examined the report, and what are you doing about it?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr. President. And as I said in my initial response, I do provide very clear condemnation for extremist, ideologically motivated violence. That is very clear in my comments, and I do so for any and all forms of such extremist, ideologically motivated activities. Mr. President, we have not only made the type of legal reforms that I indicated, as well as the type of investments that I indicated in my response to the primary answer, but we've also led internationally in terms of seeking to tackle the sharing of such materials, such as the tragedy of the Christchurch attack in online platforms. The Prime Minister's work there and the passage of legislation through this place, but also seeking to ensure that other nations take actions to be able to prevent such sharing of such horrific content in the future is an important part of a holistic response.
Your time has expired. Senator Faruqi, a second supplementary question.
Minister, amid the rapid rise in far-right extremism, which threatens the safety of communities across the country, will the government now finally commit to funding a national anti-racism strategy?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr. President. Senator Faruqi, our government did provide $63 million in the most recent budget towards social cohesion measures to help to bring Australians together. That included some $37.3 million in relation to measures that help to promote unifying Australian values, identity and social cohesion, and countering malign information online. And we do recognise that such disinformation poses a very serious threat. $17.7 million was provided to enhance engagement with multicultural communities, and $7.9 million towards research initiatives to help the ongoing work in relation to these areas. The Department of Home Affairs has had more than 13,900 engagements with key multicultural groups in supporting these efforts, a 519% increase in terms of direct outreach in that regard to make sure that we are able to respond as comprehensively as possible.
Your time has expired. Senator Gallagher. Order.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. In August this year, Mr Morrison said, and I quote, "A business under property law has the ability to say, no, you can't come in, and they can ask for that. That's a legitimate thing for them to do. It's got nothing to do with ideology." But last week, he claimed that at 80%, unvaccinated people should be able to get a cup of coffee at a cafe in Brisbane. Why did Mr Morrison change his mind?
I'm sorry, Senator Gallagher. I actually missed who you asked the question to because I was calling the Minister representing the Prime Minister. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. And indeed, the Prime Minister has continued to be clear in the other chamber and in comments in recent days that he believes that Australian businesses, as he said in that interview on the 25th of August this year, Australian businesses should and do have the right under existing laws to be able to make decisions in relation to the operation of their businesses themselves, that it is a matter for those businesses in terms of how they structure their arrangements in relation to customers and those entering their businesses and requirements around vaccination status. We've been clear all along it was not the government's intention to change the laws in relation to those arrangements to either motivate or encourage more businesses to apply such provisions, nor to do so in a way that would prevent Australian businesses from doing so. We provided and published, as the Minister for Workplace Relations did through her agencies, the information to Australian businesses that provided them with the choice and the opportunity in terms of how they respond. That's what the Prime Minister said in the interview of the 25th of August that Senator Gallagher referenced. That remains the case, and it's what he has repeated, I believe, in the House during the course of question time today. But crucially, Mr. President, it is the fact that the vast majority of Australians, more than 85% double-dosed, have done so, and that number continues to keep growing each and every day. That ensures we can and should have confidence that we can move through, as the nation is, the stages of reopening under the national plan taken by the Prime Minister to National Cabinet. That means steps are taken to reopen progressively from particularly the 80% double vaccination level That's what we've continued to do, and another important step was taken today in announcing the reopening of our international borders to visa category holders.
The time for the answer has expired. Senator Gallagher, a supplementary
Yes,
question.
thank you, Mr. President. Recently, Senator Pauline Hanson declared, and I quote, "He has listened to me because that's why he's changed his tune with the whole lot." Is Senator Hanson right to say she changed Mr. Morrison's mind?
Minister.
Well, thanks, Mr. President. I think I just, on the primary question, when it was put to me that there had been some change of position, went through the fact that the Prime Minister's position, the government's position, was consistent and is consistent in relation to the fact that businesses have that choice, and it's the choice of individual business owners. The Prime Minister listens to people right around the country, including those in this place. He doesn't always agree with the positions put by others, and indeed he was very clear, and I believe Senator Hanson made it public that he was very clear that the government would not be supporting the bill that she brought to the Parliament this morning. It was debated, it was voted on. The government did not support that bill. That is what the Prime Minister said to Senator Hanson, what she has confirmed publicly that he had said to her, and that was the position the government applied in this chamber this morning.
Senator Gallagher, second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Has Mr. Morrison changed his mind, or is he engaging in doublespeak in order to campaign to a small and extreme element of the Australian population? And when Mr. Morrison tries to tell everyone what they want to hear, how can anyone believe a word he says?
Minister.
Well, Mr. President, Mr. Morrison has provided exceptional leadership throughout the pandemic, from the moment on the 1st of February last year when the decision was made to close our international borders and to start that process, a decision that perhaps more than anything else kept COVID out of this country and provided the time and capacity for Australia to save 30,000+ lives and to be able to roll out a vaccine program that has now penetrated and reached far greater proportion of Australians than nearly any other country on this planet. A huge accomplishment to see that occur. The Prime Minister led in relation to questions of mandatory vaccination when it came to protecting our most vulnerable, those in the aged care sector. But then the Prime Minister also led in terms of saying we need to be able to reopen. He took a scientifically endorsed plan to National Cabinet, outlining a roadmap to get the states and territories to see that path to reopening as well. It's been leadership to keep Australians safe, to protect Australian jobs, but also to make sure we can successfully and safely reopen.
Time for your answer has expired. Senator Roberts, remotely.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. The British Medical Journal has published an article revealing the company that conducted part of the Phase 3 trials of Pfizer's Comirnaty COVID vaccine, covering 25,000 people, falsified data, unblinded patients, employed inadequately trained staff, and was slow to follow up on adverse events. Minister, the Morrison-Joyce government failed to conduct an Australian trial of the Pfizer vaccine and instead simply took Pfizer's word for it. Was this a failure in your duty of care to the Australian people?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, I can't agree with the statement that you make as a question, Senator Roberts, at all through you, President. The Australian government undertook a comprehensive assessment of each and every vaccine that is being used in this country to ensure Australians had the confidence that we had a safe and efficacious vaccine for utilisation in the pandemic. And, Mr. President, I think the results speak for themselves. If you look at the circumstances in respect of what's occurred in aged care this year compared to last year, the impact is profound. Mr. President, it is very clear that we took all steps to ensure that the vaccines that are being used in this country were safe and that they worked. We took evidence and advice, yes, from the companies. We received the data that they used in their trials, appropriately. But we also had the advantage of being able to use data from other jurisdictions around the world, and we've remained in close contact with those agencies that consider vaccines to ensure that they are safe to use, Mr. President. Can I say to all Australians who are still contemplating whether or not they should get a vaccine, please be assured that our public health system and our authorities, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, recognised as one of the best in the world, has done yes, Senator Reynolds, amazing work to ensure that we have access, Australians have access, anyone living in this country who wants a vaccine has access to a safe and efficacious vaccine.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Roberts, a supplementary question.
Thank you. Prior to the TGA's approval of Comirnaty vaccine, Steve Anderson, the director of the US Centre for Biologics Evaluation and Research, released data detailing potential Comirnaty adverse outcomes, including Guillain-Barré syndrome, acute myocarditis, autoimmune disease and death. This is exactly what's happened. In approving Pfizer's Comirnaty injections, did the TGA fail in its duty of care to the Australian people?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, it did not. I couldn't be any firmer than that. And as I indicated in my answer to the primary question, the Therapeutic Goods Administration has considered all data in relation to the vaccine, and in fact it continues to monitor the data in relation to the vaccines. We've been extremely open with respect to that. We've published reporting on the outcomes of the vaccination program here in Australia. We've published data in relation to adverse reactions to the vaccines of all types, Mr. President. So I reject any assertion that the TGA has failed in its duty at all. No, it has not. I could not be any firmer, President. We have one of the best, and we should be proud of the fact that we have one of the best therapeutic goods assessment organisations in the world, and we have safe vaccines for Australians.
Senator Roberts, a second supplementary question.
Thank you. Latest data from America's CDC indicates that children aged 12 to 17 are likely to experience myocarditis and related conditions at the rate of 9.5 cases per million vaccinations. Yet after the second vaccination, that rate rises sevenfold from 9.5 to 66.7. In approving 2 doses of Pfizer Comirnaty for our children without testing, are the Minister for Health, Greg Hunt, and Professor Skerritt at the TGA risking our children's lives, health and future?
Minister.
The very simple answer to that question, President, is no. As I've said in my previous answer, the TGA continues to monitor all of the data, not just from Australia, but from around the world, in relation to the impact and the utilisation of the vaccines, particularly those that we have to be administered here in Australia. We continue to monitor all of the data so that we have the most up-to-date information, and that we can continue to assure Australians that the vaccines that they are taking are both safe and efficacious. And all of the data and the advice continues to demonstrate that, Mr. President. Are there contraindications in relation to the vaccines? Yes, they are. We publish the data so that we're open with that. But we need to ensure that Australians have confidence that the vaccines we have access to are safe and efficacious.
The time has expired. Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the Liberal and Nationals government funding for skills and training is securing our economic recovery from COVID by helping Australians to take up a trade, reskill or pick up new skills?
The Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank Senator McDonald for the question. And, Mr. President, in the last 2 years, the Morrison government has made an unprecedented investment in skills and training. And we've done this in particular to secure the pipeline of skilled workers that Australia needs. In fact, the Morrison government has delivered the highest number of Australians in trade apprentices on record. What we now have is new department program data which demonstrates that Australian in-training trade apprentices reached 217,400 in July 2021. That, Mr President, is the highest number since records began in 1963. 217,400 in July 2021, the highest on record since they began actually collecting the data in 1963. And, Mr President, evidencing the positive impacts of the investment being made by the Morrison government's record funding of skills and training is now the number of Australians undertaking skills and training. It has actually now surged, with total in-training apprenticeships and traineeships for June 2021 at 347,266, and this is up from 268,435 in June 2020. And again, this is a direct result of the policies that the government has implemented, understanding we needed to make the investments to secure that necessary pipeline of skilled workers. And, Mr President, what we've done is we have supported tradies across the board, whether it's tax cuts, whether it's through full expensing measures, which has now seen order books for tools, machinery, etc. fill up across the country. We are supporting our skilled workforce, and the numbers that we now have are proof of that.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator McDonald, a supplementary question.
With these strong numbers, how has the government continued to boost funding to vocational education and training to secure the pipeline of skilled workers?
Minister.
Thank you very much. And, Mr President, we have now seen over $8.5 billion in vocational education and training investment. That is what the Morrison government has done since the commencement of the pandemic. In 2020-2021, we invested over $5.1 billion in skills and training. And what we did there was we helped Australian businesses retain their apprentices, and then, if they could, take that one step further and take on an additional apprentice. For this financial year, we've boosted that investment again with a record $6.4 billion in vocational education and training investment. This 2 years of investment, it also includes around $3.9 billion for the Boosting Apprenticeship Commencements Wage Subsidy. And that was, of course, in recognition of the fact that businesses did need assistance to take on an additional apprentice, and we would provide them with the necessary support to do that. And, of course, we've now gone further and expanded that program.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator McDonald, a second supplementary.
How will a skilled workforce support Australian jobs and businesses as part of our economic recovery and reopening from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Minister.
Well, Mr President, the government understands that investing and upskilling our workforce is a win-win for all Australians. It is certainly a win for Australian workers, and we've seen that with the numbers that are now actually undertaking a trade, undertaking an apprenticeship, etc. They have this great opportunity for career progression, but also, as you progress through your career, of course, you have higher earning potential. It's also a win, though, as we know, for Australian businesses, because with the numbers that we are seeing, they now know they will have access to a skilled workforce, a skilled Australian workforce, in fact, to enable them to actually invest in their business, to grow their business, and to create even further jobs for Australians. But it's also, as we know, it is a win for the Australian economy by ensuring that, with the numbers that we are seeing, we are more globally competitive. And in fact, the incredible number of apprentices in a trade now show that we've made the right decision as a government in backing Australian businesses to take on even more apprentices.
Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Why did Mr Morrison, when posting video of his media conference to Facebook, delete any criticism of the violent protesters in Melbourne and only include those sections in which he criticised vaccine mandates?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, I am pretty confident that Mr. Morrison doesn't sit there and post the video content himself. I'm not aware of the edited versions or what content Senator Wong in particular refers to from which post. I am certainly aware that Mr. Morrison's clear condemnation in relation to violent activities, extremist activities that promote or provoke violence in any form has been clear, resolute and repeated time and time again, despite the fact that those opposite try to paint some picture otherwise. We have been very clear in relation to the condemnation of such violence and, as the Prime Minister has said from the very first day when he became Prime Minister, that his aspiration is to see policies pursued that bring Australians together, that support the best ability. Those opposite want to provoke these debates, I know. They of course want to line up the different state Labor premiers to go out and in their coordinated attacks mount their attacks. Obviously, they don't think their own leader is very good at making those attacks. They have to rely on others to make those attacks on the Prime Minister. But, Mr. President, this insinuation somehow that the Prime Minister has not made those statements condemning violence or the attempt to provoke violence is frankly false. The Prime Minister has been clear on that time and time again.
Senator Wong, a supplementary question.
This morning on radio, this minister twice refused to condemn without qualification violent protesters and violent rhetoric. Will he now do so? Will he now condemn them without qualification, and if so, will the Prime Minister follow his lead?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, perhaps that goes to the tone of all the questions we've seen today, that of course the ability of the Labor Party to want to take any type of comment out of context, any type of remark and twist it so they choose. I was crystal clear in my condemnation on radio this morning. I know precisely what I said, even if I haven't had the time that they pretend to have had to twist or contort or selectively edit the Prime Minister's statements and what they choose to go from. I know that I was crystal clear in my condemnation and that I made sure, Mr. President, as I have in previous public remarks and iterations, that I indeed condemned those who have shown violent signs, those who have sought to promote or provoke violence. Now, Mr. President, those opposite seem to think that there should be no acknowledgement that there might be some Australians who are not undertaking such violent actions, but who do hold concerns. Well, we're not going to be deaf to all Australians. That is not the approach our government will take.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Wong, a second supplementary question.
Why are Mr. Morrison and this minister pretending to have condemned the violent protesters, when instead Mr. Morrison is engaging in doublespeak in order to campaign to a small and extreme element of the Australian population?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, why does the Labor Party always seek to divide? Why does the Labor Party always seek to pursue arguments based on selective quotes, contorting different statements that others have made? Why does this Labor Party always seek to make sure they personalise the argument, as they do against Mr. Morrison time and time and time again? Why is this Labor Party so grubby in all of their tactics that they deploy? I mean, last week it was revealed that they are paying people to put content on TikTok personally attacking the Prime Minister. That's what this Labor Party is up to. They're using the Chinese-owned website TikTok to be able to go after the Prime Minister in the most personal way they can. Why, of course, are they doing all of this? Because they're not willing to talk about their own policies. That's what was clear when Mr Chalmers yesterday refused to rule out tax hikes, refused to say where they might be spending any money, refused to detail their policies because they're just about a vicious personal smear campaign.
Please resume your seat. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Payne. Can the Minister advise the Senate on the recent strengthening of Australia's ties with our ASEAN partners?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Payne.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Fawcett for his question. The Australian government has been very strong in our support of an Indo-Pacific region that is stable and secure and prosperous, and in which all states, large and small, are sovereign and resilient. And ASEAN is at the heart of this vision, and Australia's relationship with ASEAN is fundamental to promoting it. On the 27th of October, we took a significant step forward in that relationship. As part of the first annual ASEAN-Australia Summit, ASEAN leaders agreed to Australia's proposal to enhance relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. This is a decision which reflects the strength of our ties as neighbours. Australia is ASEAN's first dialogue partner, and this is the first time that ASEAN's leaders had agreed to establish a comprehensive strategic partnership. And enhancing our relationship to a CSP positions that partnership for the future and to help us address complex and emerging regional challenges together. This is all about substance and deeper cooperation between ASEAN and Australia. During my recent visit to Southeast Asia, I also met again with ASEAN ambassadors and the ASEAN Secretary-General in Jakarta and had productive discussions on the implementation of the CSP. To support that cooperation, Australia will invest over $150 million into our cooperation with ASEAN, including a new Australia for ASEAN Futures initiative, projects that address complex challenges including health security, terrorism and transnational crime, energy security, promoting the circular economy and healthy oceans. Also, additional Australia for ASEAN scholarships to support those emerging leaders engaging here in Australia, and an Australia for ASEAN Digital Transformation and Futures Skills initiative that includes VET scholarships. These are measures which build on the $500 million investment in Southeast Asia's recovery that we announced last year in the context of COVID-19 and our very strong bilateral partnerships across the Indo-Pacific region.
Senator Fawcett, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Minister. Could you update the Senate on Australia's diplomatic engagement with Southeast Asia and how we're working with them to address shared challenges such as maintaining an open and secure Indo-Pacific region, and particularly the crisis in Myanmar?
Minister.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator Fawcett for his important supplementary question. As I said earlier this month, I visited a number of Southeast Asian countries, including Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam and Indonesia, to meet with counterparts to further advance our relationships, including our cooperation on the region's important COVID-19 recovery. The range of issues that we covered demonstrated the depth and the breadth of these partnerships. They included the strategic environment, including the situation in Myanmar, cyber, counter-terrorism, mental health, maritime security, transitions to low-emissions technologies, our trade and investment relationships, and women, peace and security. This was an opportunity to deepen our practical cooperation with Malaysia, to welcome Cambodia's role as ASEAN Chair in 2022, to progress the Australia-Vietnam Enhanced Economic Engagement Strategy, and to reaffirm our strong links and commitment to a COVID vaccine partnership with Indonesia.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Fawcett, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Could you advise the Senate of Australia's continuing efforts to partner with our region on the COVID-19 recovery?
I thank Senator Fawcett again for his supplementary question. Australia has made a commitment to share 60 million COVID-19 vaccines with our Indo-Pacific partners by the end of 2022. That includes 20 million vaccines for Indonesia and 7.8 million for Vietnam. We have also committed $300 million in vaccine support to Southeast Asia and a further $100 million to the Quad Vaccines Partnership. Already, we have shared more than 6.2 million doses with ASEAN countries. That includes 4.6 million doses to Indonesia and 1.5 million doses to Vietnam. We've also partnered with Indonesia to provide emergency COVID assistance, including oxygen-related and other medical supplies, support for Indonesia's health response and community resilience through our work with NGOs, with UN agencies, community organisations and provincial governments. We'll continue to partner with Southeast Asia as we stand together to strengthen our region's health security through the recovery and beyond.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McAllister.
Thanks, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. In August, Mr Morrison said businesses had a legitimate right to refuse entry to people who refused to be vaccinated, stating, and I quote, "The sheer fact of it is, if you're not vaccinated, you represent a greater public health risk to yourself, to your family, to your community and to others about you. So it's only sensible that people will do sensible things to protect their public health." Last week, Mr Morrison declared unvaccinated people should be able to get a cup of coffee in Brisbane regardless of vaccination status. Why should people in Brisbane be able to get a coffee regardless of vaccination status, but not people in Sydney?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, I thank Senator for her question and indeed acknowledge the interview that she was referring to. I think it's important that it's understood, if you go up the page in that transcript in that interview, that the Prime Minister was asked whether he had an appetite for mandatory vaccinations, and the answer he gave in that interview was no. He did not have an appetite for mandatory vaccinations. Now, of course, Mr President, I qualify that with the statements I've already made in question time, that the government did indeed lead in relation to mandatory vaccinations to protect those most at risk from COVID-19, to protect those in aged care facilities, to protect those where they are engaging with disability care workers, to protect those in our health systems generally who are at greatest risk, and to ensure that we supported mandatory activities in that regard. Mr President, in relation to businesses, as I've already touched on in this question time, the government has also been consistent that the legal advice from the pre-existing legal arrangements is that Australian businesses, be they a coffee shop, be they any other business, have the power and the choice themselves to make rules and decisions about accessing their business, including to determine as to whether or not vaccinated individuals can only be the only ones to access those visitors, those businesses as customers. They're the laws of the land that we have supported. We've not sought to change them in ways to force businesses to make greater mandates, nor have we sought to remove the choice from businesses in relation to their choice to make those decisions themselves, regardless of which state they are in.
Senator McAllister, a supplementary question.
Thanks, Mr President. Can the Minister confirm whether Mr Morrison has ever required journalists attending his press conferences to be fully vaccinated, and is this a current requirement?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr Morrison has complied at different times with health requirements put in place or requested by authorities, be they the recommendations of the Chief Medical Officer of Australia, or when he has been in New South Wales, restrictions in place at particular points in time in New South Wales, or restrictions put in place here when he's been in the ACT. Oftentimes, those restrictions have had to be particularly targeted to deal with the Prime Minister returning from necessary overseas work and in engaging in that necessary overseas work, for him to then meet requirements of quarantining and isolating upon return, but also to be available to be able to handle the duties of the Office of Prime Minister, be they the way in which he's engaged in Cabinet or other deliberations, or with the Australian media. Where it's been a condition that health authorities have suggested that vaccination status be a factor in relation to those isolation periods, the Prime Minister has complied with that.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator McAllister, a second supplementary.
Thanks, Mr President. Why does Mr Morrison want journalists attending his press conferences to be fully vaccinated, but thinks a barrister in Queensland shouldn't have the same protections from COVID-19 that he demands for himself as Prime Minister?
Minister. Thanks, Mr President. Well, could you imagine what those opposite would have said if the Prime Minister, whilst isolating at the Lodge on return from international business, had been advised by ACT health authorities or the Chief Medical Officer that anyone attending a press conference needed to be vaccinated, if the Prime Minister had said no, they're not going to be, if he had denied that health advice?
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Wong on a point of order.
Point of order is direct relevance. The question doesn't go to a hypothetical about the opposition. It goes to the Prime Minister's hypocrisy and consistent falsehoods.
Senator Wong, I'm listening closely to the minister's answer. Minister, you have the call.
Mr. President, I paint that scenario because those opposite would be the first to condemn if the Prime Minister was not following health advice and health recommendations at the time. What he has done, what our government has done, is listen to and act on the health advice of our Commonwealth health officials at every step of the way. And that has included, Mr. President, in relation to questions around mandates and vaccinations as they apply. We've been very clear in the sense that we've acted where the health officials have recommended to apply those mandates to those most vulnerable. But the national plan also makes clear that we should go through the stages with these high levels of vaccination to reopen and to reopen thoroughly.
Your time
Mr. President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.